So what exactly is the law? Is it just some giant stack of dusty books sitting on a shelf somewhere? Is it just a tool wielded by the powerful? Or is it the invisible, essential fabric that literally holds our entire society together? Today, we're going to challenge what we think we know, because as I was digging through this source material, it really hit me. We are unpacking the ultimate blueprint of human society.
Welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here. Today, our focus is an introduction to law and legal systems. We are diving into how nations all over the globe decide what's right, what's wrong, and the wildly complex machinery they use to actually enforce those decisions. It's fascinating stuff, so let's jump right in.
Okay, here's our roadmap for today. 1. The foundation of law. 2. Schools of legal thought. 3. Global legal systems. 4. Inside the courtroom. And 5. The power of precedent. Let's get to it.
Section 1. The Foundation of Law. Building the Blueprint.
At its absolute core, the law is this essential machinery designed to keep the peace, protect our individual rights, protect minorities, and really just promote social justice. But, it doesn't just magically appear out of thin air. Law is the very real, tangible result of political action. The political landscape entirely dictates the legal one. In a healthy nation, laws protect the citizens. But in unstable or authoritarian regimes, well, the government often fails to serve those basic functions. And when that happens, the law can actually get twisted into a tool for oppression.
So that begs the question, how do we actually measure a healthy system? Well, the World Justice Project boils the rule of law down to 4 universal pillars that basically act as a benchmark for us. First up is accountability, meaning everyone, and yes, that absolutely includes the government, has to answer to the law. Second is just law. Laws need to be clear, they need to be public, and they must protect fundamental human rights evenly across the board. Third, open government. The whole process of making and enforcing laws has got to be accessible and fair. And finally, accessible and impartial justice. This means justice has to be delivered by ethical, independent folks who actually reflect the communities they serve.
Section 2. Schools of Legal Thought. The Philosophy of Rules.
Now, why do we actually follow these rules to begin with? This pulls us right into the philosophy of law, known as jurisprudence. And I found 2 totally contrasting but completely fascinating schools of thought here. First, there's natural law. This is the idea that there are universal moral principles out there, discovered through human reason, that completely transcend any rules made up by humans. It's all about inherent rights. In stark contrast to that, we have positive law. This school argues that law is, quite simply, the command of a sovereign. It's driven by political power. It's the law as it is written down, not necessarily as we think it ought to be. Now, we aren't picking sides here, but understanding this massive philosophical split really helps explain how totally different societies view the very concept of justice.
Section 3. Global Legal Systems. How the World is Governed.
Okay, let me throw a pretty surprising fact at you from the source material. 150. That is the number of countries across the globe that practice the world's absolute most dominant legal framework. It's a system known as civil law.
When we put the 2 major global traditions side by side, the contrast is pretty wild. On one side, we have that massively popular civil law system. This originated way back in the Roman Empire. It was shaped by things like the Napoleonic Code, and it relies heavily on comprehensive written legal codes. Basically, the law is the code itself. On the flip side, we have common law. This originated in medieval England, and it's what's practiced in places like the US, the UK, and Australia. Common law doesn't just lean on codes. Instead, it relies heavily on uncodified case law and judicial precedent.
But hey, the real world is rarely just black and white. And what I found incredibly intriguing is just how many nations use what are called pluralistic systems. They actually blend these legal traditions together to fit their own unique histories. So a single country might mix civil and common law, or they might even weave religious frameworks, like Sharia or canon law, right into their national governance to create these really complex hybrid systems.
Section 4. Inside the courtroom. The mechanics of justice. Now, if we zoom in from that massive global map right down into an actual courtroom, the mechanics of how a dispute is resolved completely change depending on the system you're in. In the common law tradition, we see the adversarial system. You can think of this as almost like legal combat. Lawyers actively battle it out, presenting their evidence, while the judge mostly just sits back and acts as a neutral referee. Conversely, in civil law jurisdictions, you have the inquisitorial system. Here, the judge is highly active. They actually lead the inquiry, they question the witnesses directly, and they gather the evidence themselves. It's a model that really emphasizes truth-seeking and efficiency rather than a lawyer-driven contest.
Section 5. The power of precedent, following the leader.
Shifting our focus entirely over to the inner workings of the common law system, its absolute foundation is captured in this really powerful Latin term, stare decisis. It literally translates to stand by things decided. In practice, this is the doctrine that requires courts to follow the principles established in prior decisions. Honestly, just think of it as a very strict game of following the leader. If a higher court rules a certain way, well, lower courts must follow that exact same precedent. It's really what keeps the entire common law system consistent and predictable for everyone.
But what exactly is the judge actually bound to follow? That brings us to another Latin phrase, ratio decidendi, or the reason for the decision. So the crucial takeaway here is this. When a judge writes out a long, highly complex opinion, that entire document is not the law. No, only the key factual element, or the specific line of reasoning that actually resolves the case, becomes the binding precedent. That is the exact specific rule that lower courts are forced to obey.
But you've got to carefully separate that core reason from obiter dicta, which simply means something said in passing. I mean, judges are human, right? They like to make observations, maybe propose a hypothetical scenario, or just offer some commentary that isn't strictly necessary to decide the immediate case at hand. These little side comments are not binding. They might be highly persuasive, sure, but a future judge is absolutely not legally obligated to follow them.
Now, does that mean the civil law system just completely ignores the past? Actually, no, not quite. They use a concept called jurisprudence constante. While lower courts in that system aren't strictly bound by precedent like they are in common law, if there's a long, consistent history of courts ruling the exact same way on a certain code provision, judges will generally respect that history. It helps maintain predictability for the public, even though the written code still remains the ultimate authority.
Wow, we have covered some incredible ground today, from the fundamental building blocks of the rule of law, all the way down to the intricate mechanics of courtrooms around the globe. So, as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a pretty provocative question to chew on. Which legal tradition do you think best protects your rights? Does the written, code-heavy predictability of civil law make you feel more secure, or do you prefer the evolving, case-by-case combat of common law? Remember, understanding these systems isn't just some abstract academic exercise. This is quite literally the blueprint of your everyday life. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning and always keep questioning the rules around you.